Let me talk to you for a moment very seriously about this place, Hebron, that to those of us who live in the relative safety and comfort of the United States, I think we have difficulty understanding. And we have difficulty, I think, in the private moments of even understanding how people could live there and how difficult it must be. And I think for many of us, including me, and I've been there on many occasions, I leave there in awe and somewhat ashamed because I do not have the commitment and the courage and the personal integrity as a Jew to recognize the true importance of living there. And what I've come to realize is that for those of us, and I include myself, so please, I'm not trying to be offensive, for those of us who don't have the guts to live there, but nevertheless recognize how important it is for Jews to be there, I think we have an achrayus. I think we have a responsibility to do what we can to support the people of Hebron who do have the guts and the heroism that it takes to live in Hebron. And I think in the next generation, when the history of the Jewish people is written into the future, when our children and our grandchildren are going to be learning in yeshivot about the heroes of the Jewish people, in addition to the people at Masada, in addition to the people who are involved in the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, in addition to those heroes in our history, they're going to learn about the people of Hebron, who gave up safety and comfort so that the most important city in the world could remain Jewish. And the reason why I'm here, and the reason why I think in the private moments in your own heart you will ultimately conclude you are here, is because when my grandparents and your grandparents were being butchered and massacred and fed into ovens and gas chambers like cattle, the people in the United States did nothing. And that's why 6 million Jews were led to slaughter. And part of the responsibility, it's not just to the people who killed them, who murdered them. It's to the Americans and the people throughout the world who just stood by and allowed it to happen. Well, the excuses I've heard as I've grappled with that subject is, among the following, is the world was not the way it is today, where you have instant communication. We didn't know how bad it was. It's not true. If you study history, we knew. The President of the United States knew. 3 million Jews could have been saved if our president had simply agreed to bomb the railroad tracks leading to the concentration camps. And the Jews in the United States, some of them very great people, who did try and rally support for our people who were being killed, there weren't enough of them. And those that did speak, they weren't heard, they weren't listened to, they lacked the credibility. And the communities, like ours, like this one, like the one I live in, they were concerned lest the terror spread to them. So there was fear, and we distanced ourselves. Our families are being slaughtered again, and the world does not care, with the exception of the United States, that Baruch Hashem is taking a stand against world terrorism, primarily because we were victimized on 9/11. And let's call it the way it is. If not for 9/11, when terrorism was brought to New York, to the United States for the first time, terrorism is a foreign problem. And when a foreign problem affects Jews, the entire world, with the exception of the United States, has closed its doors, has turned its back. And we, as modern, Orthodox, non-Orthodox, Reform, conservative, intelligent, successful Jews from a variety of professions and businesses, need to not allow ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security at the suggestion that it could not happen again. It is happening every day to the terrorist act. And if nothing else, we should have learned in our life, in the lives of our parents, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, Jewish blood is cheap. And when you go to Hebron, you recognize more than any place else that the war on terrorism starts there, and that every act taken by a citizen of Hebron is a response to terrorism. And if the Jews of Hebron are abandoned and allowed to fend for themselves, in 20 minutes they would all be killed. And there would be hespedim, and there would be all sorts of rallies in which we would memorialize the heroes of Hebron. But what we are trying to do, and what we are trying to say by evenings like this, is we don't want your chesed and your concern and your compassion after a horrible event. We want your support and your chesed and your compassion and your interest to avoid these terrible events.